What's up, YouTube? This is 82 and 0. So, a topic I wanted to cover is recently Jason Williams, who I'm sure a lot of you remember the Jason Williams that played with the Kings. Not the '02 Kings, but he was gone by 2001. He played on the Grizzlies. His nickname was White Chocolate. He recently made a comment which has been rubbing a lot of people, including myself, the wrong way, where he said that Oscar Robertson wouldn't be able to play in today's NBA. And I just want to tackle that because what makes Jason Williams so qualified to say that? You know, sometimes I really do believe that just because you played basketball, it doesn't mean you understand the history of it. And to me, that's crazy because you think if you based your entire life around playing in the NBA, you'd really want to tackle the history of it, right? I mean, it makes sense to me, but it's just like hip hop, right? There's a lot of young rappers that don't really care at all about the founding of hip hop. They don't care about the old school rappers like Big Daddy Kane or KRS-One. They don't care who the innovators were. They don't care who the pioneers were. And I'm sure this happens in every genre. But anyways, he said that Oscar Robertson wouldn't be able to play in today's NBA. And I'm just really trying to understand, I mean, why he said that. Um, there just always seems to be a lot of people that just disrespect the specifically the 1960s and 70s, and now it's more 80s and 90s even players, right? And I don't get it. Sometimes there's a cognitive dissonance with them. They just see black and white footage and they think it must be from the 1920s, right? Like like that I can't think of his name. There's this YouTuber, he just plays 2K. Um he did a video where he watched Kareem's highlights and he saw a video of Kareem in college, right? At UCLA, and he goes, "What year was that? Like 1926?" You know, it's just a cognitive dissonance. But anyways, let's really try to understand why Oscar couldn't play in the NBA. He's super athletic, right? He had a crazy high vertical. Um, Jason Williams didn't have that. Um, I'm assuming maybe he's talking about 3 point shooting, but even Jason Williams was a career 32% 3 point shooter and a career 39% field goal shooter. If anything, maybe he couldn't last in today's NBA. I mean, he's not athletic, he's not a good shooter, you know. Anyways, the great players would be good in any era, but Oscar was a very good athlete, right? He was very fast, had a quick vertical, very strong. He was a big guard, especially for the time, but even now he'd be a big guard. And if you want to put him in a modern comparison, some people compare him to Russell Westbrook, but that's not true. Um, Russell Westbrook has a lot of turnovers, and Oscar was pretty notorious for thinking everything through as a point guard. He didn't throw a lot of bad passes. He didn't take a lot of bad shots. He was very efficient for his career, right? Complete opposite of Jason Williams, right? And I mean, for Oscar Robertson's career, he averaged 48% from the field. And I mean, there were seasons where he got over 50% from the field, like 68. But anyways, absolutely Oscar Robertson would be able to play today. He played in the fastest paced era in NBA history, right? Running up and down that court. It had good and Phil Jackson, obviously people know him as the coach of the Bulls and Lakers. He played on those Knicks teams against Oscar Robertson, and he said Oscar Robertson had the best post game he's ever seen for a guard. I mean, the guy was skilled. And I mentioned his assists. You got to keep in mind that in that era, they were very strict about what was an assist. If you threw it, they had to shoot it right when they get it. Nowadays you take a few steps, you take a few dribbles, and it still counts. That didn't happen back then. So realistically, he probably would have averaged. I know his best season he averaged 11.5 assists per game, but it probably would have been like 13 or 14, maybe higher, right? Um, as far as his defense goes, I mean, he wasn't bad as a defender. I guess the best comparison I can give for him is LeBron James. Um, Great rebounder, great playmaker, drives to the basket, tactical, efficient. But another thing too is if Jason Williams means he couldn't play today because of ball handling, let me say this, right? A lot of newer fans, they think that ball handling is something new, right? That only within the past 20 years people have figured out how to dribble a ball. But what you got to understand is the NBA was very strict back in the 1960s and 70s about dribbling, right? If the ball was if your hand was underneath the ball, right? Like let's say you're doing a crossover, and your hand is underneath the ball, you'd be called with a travel. Nowadays, that's just considered a crossover, like some slick ball handling. But does that mean the guys back then didn't have ball handling skills? No. Uh, One of the best ball handlers of that generation, Marcus Haynes, right? Probably the best ball handler of all time. Could dribble a ball 300 times a minute, right? Left hand, right hand. And that's another thing. They say Bob Cousy couldn't dribble with his left hand. Bob Cousy was ambidextrous. Okay? Crack open up a book and actually read about the rules and why, right? Like dunking was banned in the NCAA, for example, right? You could have a kid go, oh, well, they didn't know how to dunk back then. No, it's the rules. You know what I mean? The games were called differently. It doesn't mean these players weren't skilled. They did this their entire life, right? They put all of their life into becoming a basketball player. You think they just didn't think how to dribble. No, because when you watch a lot of those, for example, a lot of those Globetrotter games, like I mentioned with Marcus Haynes, they had ball handling skills. And even NBA players, like I mentioned during that time. Rucker Park was a famous park where NBA players would play in the off season in the 60s and 70s. And when you watch the footage of them playing there, because there's no ref calling them for a travel for underhanding the ball, a lot of those guys had great footwork, great moves, great dribbling moves behind the back. Now, am I saying Oscar Robertson is like a Kyrie Irving? No, but he'd be just fine today. I'm so tired of this shit, man. I know the purpose of being in media now is to promote the new product, right? The NBA media, they're not trying to hype up a 1967 player. Just like a car salesman wouldn't want to hype up a 1967 car, right? That's my channel's job, is to appreciate the players of the past. And so I get what they're doing, but I just wonder why it's only a problem in basketball. Because, other sports, right? Like baseball, for example. Do you think a player today, like a baseball player today, like Mike Trout, would be able to come out unscathed if he said disrespectful stuff about like Hank Aaron or Jackie Robinson? I mean, he'd be obliterated, right? But for some reason in basketball, ignorance and hatred of your elders is just the culture of the NBA, I should say, not basketball itself. Hating your elders, right? Hating the people who came for you. Oh, it gets you likes, it gets you shares, it gets you comments, and the plumber's argument, right? Because those players in the past didn't make as much money today, they obviously don't count. None of their contributions count. But when you take inflation right? If you adjust inflation, a lot of those players in the past that you say are plumbers, they were doing just fine in their era financially. No, they weren't making like James Harden money or LeBron James money, but they were doing just fine. Appreciate the greatness in every era because every era contributes something, man. And on the flip side, too, there's a lot of people who hate the new era. Oh, they take too many three pointers. Oh, they do this. Okay, look, that's how the game is played today, right? You got to appreciate it for what it is. These players today are skilled. The players of yesterday were skilled. They're putting their all into it. And it's disrespectful to say Oscar Robertson wouldn't be able to make a roster today. If you were to say somebody like Joe Folks wasn't able to make a roster today, and at least do it in a respectful way, be like, hey, I appreciate what they brought to the game, but I'm not sure how they would fare today. That's fine. It's more understandable. But Oscar Robertson, I really just don't get it, man. So let me know what your thoughts are down below, and thanks for watching.